Kerri Sackville is my guest today. She's a regular writer for the Sunday Life magazine, the Sydney Morning Herald, the Melbourne Age. She's a well-heeled journalist in Australia. She's released 5 books, including her latest one, which is all about spending time alone. Yep, you heard me, alone. Her latest book is actually called The Secret Life of You. It's not a throwback to a 2000s drama based in St Kilda. No, it's about spending time alone. And if you can't recall the last time that happened, I really hope this conversation will help you, I guess, carve out some time to make it happen, because the benefits are pretty solid. Kerri's an absolute hoot. Enjoy this conversation. I most certainly did. Kerri, it's delightful to have you on the show. Thank you for making the time to do this. I am sorry that we didn't get a chance to do it face-to-face, but I've saved you the daycare pathogen that has infiltrated our household, and I'm pretty sure that you're beyond those years now.
I am. My youngest is 15, but she did give me COVID. So, there's still that.
Yeah. Also, conniptions.
Yeah,
also,
many conniptions.
I am excited. You've written many books. Your book about dating in midlife, because it is something that after I got divorced, I was like, oh, holy shit, here I am and I'm single. And the last time that I was single, to send a text message, like there's a reason my thumb one's bigger than the other, is because the amount of text, like there was no apps, there was no smartphones, cameras didn't come on phones, there was nothing, there was, and that was that long ago, and here I am swiping. It was the worst thing in the universe. Yeah. I hated every second of it.
It was incredibly exciting for the first couple of days, and then it was really awful, and I did it for a long time. And in the end, I am in a relationship, but I met my partner off the apps. After all those years of swiping and matching and, having these long, really chemistry-filled conversations with people via text, and then you meet them and you have absolutely nothing to say to each other. It's like, wow, well, nice memes.
How did you meet someone like in the IRL, as they say?
I know. Amazing, huh? It sounds very corny. He invited me to speak at a conference. Yeah.
Power dynamics are always exciting.
Yeah. But no, we connected and we stayed friends for a while, and we ended up in a relationship quite some years later. And I've never actually done that before. I'd never been, friendly with somebody and then moved into a relationship, and it's actually a really, really good way of doing it.
I would agree with you. Yeah. I would agree with you entirely. And it can get poo-pooed sometimes, but I am great friends with my wife.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, you would know from if you did any online dating, I mean, the problem with it, the great flaw in it is that you've got to make snap decisions really quickly about these people that you're basing it on photos and a few text messages. And, text communication is really different to in-person communication. And you can have great text chemistry with someone, but they're sitting there and they're, composing their text messages, and they might be showing them to their mates, and they might be brainstorming. And in person, when it flows back and forth, it's completely different. And it's the same with, with meeting friends. You can meet friends online and think you've got a great connection, and when you finally meet up in person, it's like, oh God, like this is really awkward.
Yeah, I just liked it intensely, and
it's hard. There are success stories. I know people who've, met their partners online, but
I've been to weddings based on it. Great. Hooray.
But
hooray for you.
When I feel like, in my experience, if you, like, there are people who get on the apps and they meet someone really quickly and they're set and they're happy. And I feel like if you're like me and you're there for, you're single for a long time, and it becomes really, you become really jaded. You can be quite traumatized. There's nothing lonelier really than sitting opposite someone in a cafe, trying to make conversation with them, trying to connect with them, and you realize that you are just poles apart. And you come home feeling worse than you did before. It's awful.
And when I consider it, the latest book, it explores time alone and explores the concept of the benefits of being alone, and being comfortable with your own presence.
Yes.
And, there's a part of, certainly if, you're me, I found a great amount of healing and rewiring of habits and things like that after being in two quite long-term relationships fairly close together, to suddenly then be not in anything for about 3 years was actually really good.
Yeah.
Because I got to have a chance to sit down and have a jolly good look and go, as I said, through these apps going, oh, no, this is not what I want. No. Yeah. And what kind of person do I need to be to attract the kind of person that I would like to have around? And the alone part was nice until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And then I was lonely. And I was like, this is the most beautiful sunset. Oh, fuck, I'm by myself. Great. Where's the point for you where the solitude has a benefit or the time alone has a benefit, and then, you know, it's time, there's more benefit for a moment or, you know, a life to be shared?
Look, human beings aren't meant to be alone all the time. We're also not meant to be never alone. So that's the thing. We need connection with other people, but we also need connection with ourselves. And, you know, I talk about it in the book. It's incredibly important to have real, meaningful connections. But it's ironic because the greater the connection that we have with ourselves, the greater the connection we can have with other people. And there's a couple of reasons for that. All of us want to feel love for who we are and seen for who we really are. Like, that's what everybody says. That's what love is, right? So, you know, you're with somebody who really sees you, who really knows you, who really understands you. If you never stop and actually get to know yourself, you're not going to recognize it when it's there. So, you know, for me, when I was really dating quite frenetically for years and years. I never stopped. I never learnt to be comfortable with myself. And as a result, I think I was looking, you know, for connection in completely the wrong places with completely the wrong people. And it wasn't until I stopped and I learned to be comfortable with myself and learn who I was and what I wanted out of life and ask myself all of those questions and connected with myself, then I was able to recognize that connection when it was there. And it also, you know, when you're afraid to be alone, you're also seeking connections in all the wrong places because other people, you know, social media, everything becomes a distraction. It's not about connecting meaningfully with someone. It's about using somebody else, you know, to fill a gap in yourself, and not in a good sexual way, like in a bad way.
Hey,
yeah,
I know, but I know exactly what you're saying,
yeah.
and you know, I've talked about this a bit, but it's a good point to bring it up. In that, I met my wife because there was someone very close to me that I'd been working with for a very long time now who just said, look, I can't look after you. She was my makeup artist. She said, I can't look after you next week. So I said yes to a gig before this one. I've got someone to come to take care of the job and you're welcome.
Yeah.
And at that point in my life, I had known enough about, okay, I had been choosing things that I thought I needed, but if I had to think about where all those choices got me, they got me to a place that was not good for either of the people involved in that. So my ability to choose what I thought I needed is not great. I might trust someone else's choice here and just see where it goes.
Yeah.
And there it was.
Yeah.
And taking myself out of that equation was actually quite important because I kept going for this thing that I thought I wanted, but what I wanted and what I actually needed were two very different things.
Yeah.
When we're looking at ourselves, and we, as you said, you were dating back to back to back. What was it that had you stop down and essentially go, well, hang on, what's the difference here? It
was a really bad time. It was 2020. It was lockdown.
It's a bad time
here
for
in
everyone.
Sydney. It was a bad time for a lot of people. For me, it was really grim. I was having some health problems. I've got an autoimmune disease, which had been under control for most of my life and just was, probably from stress and all sorts of other reasons, out of control. And I was really, really worried about my health. The media, you know, I'm a columnist. I was doing a lot of work up until that point. The media crashed and burned, you know, they weren't getting the advertising revenue, so they couldn't pay columnists. I had very little work. I had 3 kids at home, 2 of whom were really unhappy. My eldest was third year uni and hating uni online. My big girl had, you know, finished school, done 6 days of uni, and, you know, then at home, that was a really rough time for her. My little one, who was still at school, was having a great time, like supposedly online learning and actually playing Minecraft with her friends. But 2 of them were really unhappy, and I was incredibly lonely. And what I had done previously when I was lonely was just like go on the dating apps and use them as a way to fill that kind of need for connection. And that wasn't available to me because it was the pandemic. I couldn't see my friends. I couldn't wander around my spiritual home of Westfield Bondi Junction. And I was just spending all my time literally scrolling madly on Instagram. Like that was, honestly, I just would fall into those loops. They're called ludic loops, like where you just get stuck scrolling and scrolling.
What did you call them?
Ludic loops. So that's a term. I didn't coin that term. A sociologist coined that term, but it's when it's because, as you know, social media uses gambling technologies to keep us hooked, and they want us to stay. And it's when you pick up your phone just to check if you've got any messages, and you kind of wake up 2 hours later and you've literally lost 2 hours of your life just scrolling mindlessly. And I realized I was feeling more and more lonely, more and more disconnected. It wasn't working. And I thought, I've just got to stop. I've got to try something else. What I have been doing up until this point has led me here, and it's not a good place. The dating had not gone well. I was constantly trying to find connection with the wrong people in the wrong places. And, I talk about loneliness in the book, but loneliness is it's not a disease. There's been a lot of talk about the loneliness epidemic and loneliness is a disease. Loneliness is like hunger. When we're hungry, it's because we need food. When we're lonely, we need connection. So loneliness is the difference between the connection that we have and the connection that we need, the connection we desire. And the more connected you are to yourself, the less lonely you're going to be when you're alone, and the less lonely you're going to be full stop. And then the more you're going to be able to connect with other people because, again, as I said before, you're not using them to fill that need in you. And so I resolved to just stop with the phone, stop with the social media, and learn to connect with myself. And it was incredibly hard. It was literally a case of like my fingers would be twitching to pick up my phone or to call someone or to just distract myself. And it was hard. Obviously I didn't take myself to a silent retreat because that was not something that was available to me, but I did just start literally sitting with no devices, with my thoughts. I did a lot of journaling. I would go for walks, again, without a podcast, as much as we all love podcasts and we love your podcast, but it was something that I needed to take a break from. When I was able to, my parents have a place on the Central Coast, and I went and stayed there by myself for a few days, and I'd never done that before, just in silence. And I wanted to learn how to befriend myself as I tried to be a friend to other people. So I mean that very literally. Like I got to the point where, and I can do that now, where if I am distressed, if I am anxious, if I'm uncomfortable, I can actually talk to myself like I would talk to someone else. I'll say to myself, it's okay, Kez, everything's going to be all right. This is going to be okay. I'll journal. I'll often have conversations with myself, particularly in the car. I'll ask myself questions. I'll hear the answer. And, what I thought was I was single. I spent a lot of time alone. And I thought there is no guarantee that I will find a partner. And even if you do find a partner, as you know, there's no guarantee that that person will be with you until the end of your life. And there will be times, even in the best relationship, where your partner or your friends or your parents or your kids can't give you the connection that you need at that point or can't give you the support. And I realized I had to learn to support myself. And I can honestly say that it was a difficult process, but I feel like it was a successful one. And when I did eventually connect with my partner and started spending more time together, I was able to just enjoy him and love him without that desperate, frantic need. Is this going to work? Is this going to be okay? Are we going to end up together? That is born out of a terror of being alone.
Yeah, you could bring everything back to the denial of death, can't you? But the idea 100%. of being alone is if this swipe doesn't work, I will die alone. Like,
literally,
no, mate, if you do, it'll be okay.
Well, I think it helps to realise we are fundamentally alone in some way. Yeah. When we talk about the denial of death, and we're all so scared of death in our society. And I read a couple of books recently on Stoicism and the whole idea that we should confront our own death daily to make us appreciate life. And there is really something in that.
It's a goodie.
It's a real goodie. But no matter who you have in your life, nobody else can die with you, or at least you certainly hope they're not going to, unless it's a really bad motorcycle accident, perhaps. We won't talk about that. But, you know, ultimately we do journey through life alone. We have people around us. We have people who love us, but we all have a secret self inside us that we can try and share with another person, but we can never share all of ourselves. You know, if you were to share with your wife every single thought that crossed your mind,
doesn't go well.
It's not going to go well.
As someone with impulsivity issues, it happens, and it's never good.
No, it's never good. Like,
never good. What do you think about this? Terrible. What would you say? A lot.
But we all have those internal monologues, and we are meant to have some part of ourselves that is just for us. And nobody in the world, I'm going to talk about this book, nobody in the entire world is exactly like you. You will find people who can relate to you. You'll find people who, you know, can understand you as much as a human being can understand. But we are all essentially alone inside our own heads. And the more comfortable we are with that, the greater the ease of our passage through the rest of our lives.
You mentioned a silent retreat, and I don't think, I prefer Chen Rezig up near Udlo, but hey, the Central Coast will work. Well, that was quite transformative for me. I went and did a silent retreat in my early 20s up in a Buddhist temple, and up in southeast Queensland, which I thoroughly recommend. Though cultural practices of solitude are definitely a thing, whether, you'd be the Hindu, going off into the forest, or as you mentioned, the Buddhist, solitude retreat. But the trope is that it's a long, beardy, skinny person sitting out there forever. But that's not it, is it? And then it comes in religion as well. There was a Jewish carpenter who spent 40 days and 40 nights in a desert once. What is it about the cultural practice that sometimes gets, kind of written into the religious ceremony of solitude that you think, how do you think it ended up there?
Oh, there's an incredible rich history of solitude right up until modern times, and then it sort of stopped. Even like the poets of the 18th and 19th centuries would often go and retreat, to a cabin in the woods or whatever. They'd have a patron who would pay for them just to sit there and make their art, and that was really respected. Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad and Moses, they all spent time in solitude, and solitude is where people, if you are religious, where they, communicate with their God, where they communicate with themselves. Solitude is where wisdom is born, when you look inside yourself and find the kind of universal wisdom throughout the ages. And for artists, there's such a rich history of solitude, but we in our modern culture regard it with such like suspicion. I was just thinking, I was, reading up, Jessica Watson's been in the news again. She was the solo sailor around the world. And, I remember when she went on her journey, and people like her who embark on solo adventures. And we're not like, oh, wow, this is so amazing. You're going to have this time alone. You're going to have this transformative experience. It's like, wow, like, is she crazy? Is she like, she been unhinged, or at the very best, she's so brave, so brave. Yeah. We are really scared of solitude, and we see, loners, like people who are very comfortable in their own company, as a little bit weird and maybe even a little bit dangerous. And we think that if they're not focused on other people, because our culture is so focused on relationships as like the locus of all happiness and all fulfillment. So if somebody is comfortable with themselves and they're not focused on other people, well, if they're not focused on us, then they don't care about us. And if they don't care about us, maybe they're going to hurt us. And so there's, loner, or like someone who's comfortable alone becomes loner, becomes, possible psychopath. When really some people are just really happy in their own company. And that's something that I think is to be applauded. It means they've got a rich inner world.
When you were on your I'm not touching my phone quest, what kind of I have tried, and I've got apps here and apps there that I always end up disabling. I've even given my wife my screen time passcode like I'm a 6-year-old boy, just to try to stop myself from doing this thing. When you went on your mission to try to I'm going to learn how to be by myself, what kind of interventions did you put in place to help you achieve that?
Oh, literally turning my phone off. And I guess for me, I knew that what I was doing wasn't working, and I had to do something different because I was really unhappy. And so I would literally turn my phone off and just put it in my drawer. And when I would want to go and get to it before I had decided that, it was time, I would just say no. Like I used that when I was trying to stop biting my nails many years ago. Like my fingers would come up to my mouth. I'd be like, no, actually say the word no.
Wow.
And I would also go for long walks without my phone, which I had never done. And that was also really hard because, you know, I like to use the step counter and can be a bit obsessive about that because, again, apps are addictive and they make us addicted to getting our 10,000 steps and all of that, which is, of course, just a random number. But I would go for walks without my phone. So I would have to, you know, do a big walk and actually get back to get my phone.
Yeah, love it.
And as I said, I journaled a lot and I found that really, really helpful because journaling is essentially being in a conversation with yourself. And I just find it so interesting how people, you know, go along their whole lives and never actually see themselves as somebody they're, I guess, in a relationship with. But, you know, the way I try and think of it is imagine yourself on a long-haul flight, except this flight is lasting, say, you know, 80 years, 90 years, and you've got somebody sitting next to you and they seem like a nice person and you're going to be stuck with them for the next 80, 90 years. Can you imagine not starting a conversation with them and getting to know them? That, you know, you're going to be stuck with them. And yet we don't do that with ourselves. And we think we know ourselves, but it's, you know, with you sitting here asking me questions, I'm going to be learning about myself because you're asking me things and I have to think of the answers. But I can ask myself those questions too. I can interview myself like I would interview somebody else. It's just so enlightening when you do start asking yourself questions and talking to yourself. You'll be amazed at what comes out, like what the answers are.
Did you find a resistance? And I like to, you know, we talk about inner child and this, that, and the other, but if anyone's had a toddler who really wants to watch this thing, whatever is the thing of the day, there'll be a moment where you say, no, actually we have to go right now. And then it'll escalate and escalate and escalate. And just before they come to, you know, acceptance, it's like 4 times bigger than the previous thing. If you can just hold on past that, boom, they're like, yeah. Okay, I guess we'll go. Yeah. Did you experience that with yourself? Was there a point where you were like, I don't want to get to that drawer anymore? Huh.
Yeah, look, there's always times where you know, you just don't want to go there. And for me particularly, you know, I was a very anxious child. I was a very anxious young adult and older adult, and I'd worked a lot on my anxiety, but you know, it's still always there. And for me, I think that the darkest thing inside me was that absolute terror of never being loved again, or never feeling really genuinely connected to another person. I've got lots of friends who are single and who are perfectly happy being single, and I had some really good times being single, but I had this utter terror of never feeling that sense of deep connection with another person again. And I'd been in a really difficult marriage where, you know, we were not connected for a long time, and then a series of relationships where, you know, I was not connected. And that was something that I really wanted and really just wanted to experience again. And so for me, that was almost like my, you know, that was the darkest part. And that terror would come up and it would really be great fear. And the way I imagine is because, you know, when I was trying first to have a baby and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to have a baby and then had a miscarriage, and that absolute desperation to have a child it felt very similar. And it was scary and it was confronting and it was really hard. And there'd be times when it would just rise up and the only thing I wanted to do was distract myself. And sometimes I would. I mean, I didn't burn my phone. It was still there and I still had 3 kids at home. But what it was I would take periods of time where I would say, right, I'm just going to sit with this. And as difficult as it was, any emotion, I mean, I've been bereaved. I lost my sister when she was 37, and what you learn about any sort of pain or grief is that the only way to go through it is to actually let yourself feel it. And so I'd spent at that point 7 years fighting that fear of being alone and trying to distract myself with dating, with men, with friends, with, you know, social media. And when I actually sat with it, eventually it passed. And I got to a point where I was genuinely fine. And of course that, you know, then shortly after that I met my partner. But I really don't believe that whole, you know, shtick about you find someone when, you know, you least expect it, when you stop looking. It was 2 things. One, I was at a point where I wasn't so needy, I wasn't so desperate. And so I could actually see, you know, people for who they were instead of how they could potentially fill this, you know, gaping, you know, chasm inside me. And also it was just luck. Sometimes it's just luck.
Yeah. And we also, I have this ridiculous life where large chunks of my evolution as a human being have been documented on live television. And, you know, a clip will fly by or a YouTube video will fly by, and my wife will just look at me and she would say, I would not have even looked twice at you. I wouldn't even, you would have walked into a club or whatever and you might have given it a shot, but like, I wouldn't have even, no. And I somehow transformed into a person that she went, oh yeah. You know, I truly believe that we, when you're ready, the universe will provide, is another way of saying, is like, when you stop being a punish to be around, the kind of person that you've never been around before will go, actually, I might be close to you now, but you've never known that they're there because you've just been, in my experience, just way too hard to be around. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened with Audrey. You got 3 children and, you know, it's one thing, and it's, you know, it's jokes are made about it that, you know, mum, or particularly in our, you know, society where mums who work or work part-time or don't work, except for working in the home, are constantly surrounded by people and more lonely than ever. And it's really difficult. Compounding that with, if you are doing your job correctly as a parent, and this breaks my heart because I see it happening already with our youngest, who's 3, but it's certainly happening with our eldest. You are in a slow motion breakup with this person that you love more than anything you've ever loved. And if you do your job right as a parent, slowly they will want less and less, in fact, nothing at all to do with you. Yeah. And that is like, it's the worst, but it's like, it's because I've done a good job, you know, because they feel safe enough to go. It's awful.
It really is. And having 3 of them, it's funny because my son moved out, I think 18 months ago now, and I was really proud of him, and you know, he launched, he's doing great. That was a great feeling. My big girl is about to turn 22, and you know, we talk a lot about her eventually, you know, transitioning to more independence and living out of home. But with 3, you know, my youngest my big kids were 6.5 and 8.5 when she was born, and she was born 3 weeks after my sister died. So she has always been like my heart, my external heart, my source of comfort. And she's 15 now. And, you know, she is fuck off. Like, seriously, the eye rolling. And
Stop talking. I can't believe you talked on a podcast about that.
It's so wrenching. But it's healthy and good, right? So I like completely get it. But up until quite recently, she was my emotional support animal, and it's really hard, and so I can recognize how great it is. But again, I had to do a lot of work on myself, because when she started the whole eye rolling and you know, oh God, and oh, it's so embarrassing, and oh, you cringe, and whatever, I felt it was like a breakup, like with the romantic part. I felt so rejected, and then I would, you know, I'd sometimes cry, and then I'd want to go and run to her and say, why are you doing this to me? You know, I love you so much. And I had to really work on stopping and talking to myself and talk myself down, because that's not fair on her. Like, she's doing exactly what she should be doing.
Yeah. And we've seen there's plenty of examples in popular culture of when that happens. And it's unfortunately the trope is it's the mother that does it, but boy, it's certainly the father. I've met many a fella. There's one of my good friends. We've since kind of not been in touch for a little while, but one of my good friends was, you know, suddenly found himself in a law firm, you know, 3 years into his, or 2 years into his articles. And then so he's like, hang on, I don't want this. This is what my dad wanted. Fuck this. Yeah. And he fucked off and went and did a physics degree or something, and he's just like loving life. Yeah. And he moved to something like Cairns or something, like moved like far away, but like dad, that was his father. Yeah. Just, this is what you're doing. Yeah. And there was no question. And that is just fucked up, you know. And but you know, people only do what they know, and that was the generation of the, you know, our parents, my parents' years were like that, I guess, you know. To hear you describe that, like, I'm now comfortable with this idea of being alone and, you know, it's hard to have my kids do this, but I'm okay with it. I do work and I'm okay with it. That's like, for many people listening, that might be just like, you may as well be talking the story about Hansel and Gretel, you know, like they're expecting, you know, a woodsman to come out of nowhere. Like, I'm pretty sure it's someone. For people who would like to just begin practicing solitude, they may not be able to go and do a retreat.
No,
they may not
yeah.
be able to get time away from their kids. They were like, what's a way that we can start to like incrementally, you know, what's the couch to 5K of practicing solitude?
Yeah, no. So it's a really good question. And if you had been asking, like, I'm trying to think of the timeline, but 30 years ago, say, 40 years ago, it wouldn't even be a question. Like when we were growing up, I'm sure you remember, like when I was a kid, when I was in my room, when I was in my bedroom, I had my own bedroom, you know, after the first few years of life. And when I was in my bedroom, I was alone. We didn't have a phone reaching my bedroom. You know, we had one phone in the kitchen and the cord kind of stretched out a bit, but not that far. I didn't have a television. I think I had a clock radio eventually, so I could play music in my bedroom. But when I was in my room, I was either reading or writing in my diary or listening to music or completely alone with my thoughts. When I was walking to school, I was alone with my thoughts. If I was sitting on a bus, I was alone with my thoughts. So the way that people can just start to get used to being alone with their thoughts is to take those incidental moments of the day, which we all have. But the problem is now you're standing in a queue and what do? You pick up your phone, right? When you're in the car, you put on a podcast or you call a friend. You know, I walk around my neighbourhood and there is one girl that I see every single morning and she's walking, and it doesn't matter what time I go, she's there and she's talking to people. And she obviously uses her walking time to talk to people. But what I'm suggesting is just for those moments when you're sitting on the toilet. I mean, how many of us pick up our phones when we're on the toilet? And then again, you find yourself, you know, sitting there for 10 minutes and you're scrolling.
The entire generation of kids who won't be able to spell sodium lauryl sulfate because they've never read a shampoo bottle while taking a shit.
Yes, but also, I mean, do you remember when I used to eat breakfast, I would read the back of the Weet-Bix like the Weet-Bix packet, and I would know all the ingredients.
You're essentially saying that we inadvertently, by doing all these other things, where bear in mind your neighbour who goes for a walk, that may be a part of their motivation for exercise, and I thoroughly recommend that. But people may use a podcast as a reward for working out or something. However, you're talking about essentially robbing ourselves of this incidental processing time.
Yeah,
that we
yes.
Otherwise used to have we didn't think about it, but it was always there. This way to just let our subconscious sort things out and then pop things back out again. But if we never allow our brains to do that, things can escalate. Things can get us into trouble.
Well, first of all, we're overstimulated. Like as I said earlier, I mean, human beings aren't supposed to be always alone, but we're not supposed to be never alone, right? And we used to have those casual moments of solitude. But when you're constantly picking up your phone in every single idle moment, you are never giving your brain a chance to power down. We need to power down. We need breaks from all of that stimulation. Our brains haven't evolved, beyond, our brains have not evolved to process all of this content, this input that we're getting all the time. So we really need that for our mental health to stop overwhelm. We need a chance to actually feel our feelings, because if every time you're idle, you're picking up your phone or you're turning on a podcast or you're watching TV or whatever, you're never actually sitting with your feelings. We need it just to get to know ourselves, and we just need it to learn to be okay in our own company and to learn to befriend ourselves. And there are real consequences if we don't. And, you read like all the bosses of big tech don't give their kids phones because they know how dangerous it is.
That's the most terrifying shit of all those films I've seen, all those documentaries I've read, all the books I've read, is the, oh, fuck no, I don't let them touch it.
Of course they wouldn't, and they know. And what's also interesting is about a lot of these, big tech giants and other giants of industry say that they could not achieve what they achieved in this climate because, again, they're never alone, and it's in solitude that our minds wander. So it's in solitude that we activate the part of the brain that is responsible for daydreaming and creativity. And if you never get those moments, how can you be creative? How can you come up with ideas? How can you have any sort of independent thought? And I write in the book, and when I was writing this, I thought, oh, is this a stretch? But in fact, the research plays out it's not a stretch. Like, we need alone time for our moral courage. And, when you do any research into people who have become radicalized, people who subscribe to kind of weird conspiracy theories, trolls online, they're not buying into like a cohesive, logical framework, some kind of system of thought that makes sense. What they're doing is that they're not stopping to think about the conspiracy theories or whatever that they're subscribing to. A lot of the extremist ideology is simply about people not stopping to think about what they think they believe in. So they're getting into groupthink. They're not taking a step back and going, does this make sense? What are the holes in the logic? Do I really believe this? A lot of, acts of violence or trolling or evil or extreme right-wing thinking is just a failure to actually stop and think.
How do you help you're getting to the end phase of guiding young people and launching them out into the world to hopefully be good to society and to themselves? Yeah. How do you go about guiding, and how did you go about guiding the young people in your life to, once you discovered it, were you able to communicate it at all to the young people in your life?
It's really difficult because I came to this quite late. It's only been in the last few years. And I have noticed an enormous difference in the way that my big kids, who I said they're turning 22 and 24, huge difference in the way they use technology to my 15-year-old. Because my big kids still had time without phones, time without mobile devices, and both of them can put down their devices and do their work or be creative or talk to people and literally leave their phone sitting there. My 15-year-old, it is really, really difficult. I am fighting, like we all are, a really, really tough battle. What I wish I could do, and the one kind of piece of advice I give to parents, or one of the pieces of advice I give to parents in the book, is delay giving your kids technology as long as you possibly can, because as soon as you do, it's done. And in fact, with my 15-year-old, I gave her a phone quite early on because she was the youngest and she was then catching a bus and like her siblings were, and there were days when her big sister would be doing something else and she'd be by herself, and I wanted to be able to track her. Now, I was never tracked as a kid, but I completely bought into the whole thing of, oh God, what if I don't know where my child is? And I don't feel I've done a great job. She has her phone on most of the time. It is something I'm still working on. There are moments now where she'll put it down, but it's a battle I'm constantly fighting. And I feel bad about it, but I also know we are up against something way, way bigger than us. It's so addictive and it's so pervasive. And
what was the loop you called it earlier? The
ludic loop.
Ludic. I'm going to have to look into that because that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, well, it's exactly what happens to gamblers when they're sitting, at the pokies and they're just losing hours and hours feeding it in. It's exactly the same thing. You're on the phone and you're just scrolling. And sometimes I find myself, when it does happen, and we all need distractions sometimes. I'm not saying never pick up the phone, but sometimes it happens. I think, what have I just been looking at? Just hours of videos that are complete fluff.
It's scratching, but it's scratching eczema.
Yeah,
it feels okay for a second. Then when you're done, it's like,
like what have I done?
Well, this is ridiculous. Yeah. Like, so it's the idea that, and we talked about, loners and, people who can be conspiracy-ish and, kind of get lost looking for, essentially everyone's just looking for connection. Johan Hari would probably tell us a lot about that. Yeah. Just looking for connection, trying to feel less alone. Yeah. But can that, loner kind of trope, and I know I've been there. There was a time in my life where I didn't want to leave the house for like 3 days, 5 days at a time. I wouldn't leave. Being with one's self, is that some sort of alleviation, and being okay with being with oneself and whatever the fuck has happened, and being an acceptance of the thoughts that show up? Is that a part of maybe alleviating that need to constantly look and poke and get stimulated?
Yeah, of course, because the more comfortable we are with ourselves, the less we need distraction. But, it feeds on itself. It's not just, the more comfortable I am with myself, the less I need to pick up my phone. It's also the more I pick up my phone, the less I'm going to be comfortable with myself. It's like when we had TVs, people used to just sit around listening to listening to music together or playing cards, whatever. And then TVs were invented, and everyone would just, at any quiet moment, you'd turn the TV on. Being idle wasn't a problem before we had a solution for idleness in every spare moment. So being idle wasn't a problem when I was growing up. It was normal to have idle moments. It was normal to have downtime. As I said, walking to school or sitting on a bus or waiting in a queue. But once we were given this magic solution to idleness and this magic solution for kids to boredom, then, we stop knowing how to deal with those moments. So the more you pick up your phone in every idle moment, the less you know how to entertain yourself. And so you see it all the time. And again, I'm not shitting on parents. I mean, I've raised 3 kids. I know how difficult it can be. And I made exactly these mistakes myself. But when you see kids being pushed in prams and they're 2 years old and they're looking at an iPad.
Boy.
Right. And what's happening then is they are being trained not to know how to use their imaginations. Kids, we all have imaginations. We all are resourceful. And, before mobile phones, if you don't have a mobile phone, you put a kid down on the floor and you give him a spoon, and he'll start banging the spoon and playing with whatever's there. But you give a kid an iPad, and the next time he's alone, he's going to want the iPad. He's going to lose that ability to entertain himself, and we're all losing the ability to entertain ourselves.
But are we also we're losing the ability for innovation as well? The idea of you mentioned boredom. Boredom is an extraordinarily important part of creativity and problem solving, isn't it?
Yeah, well, boredom is where your imagination gets kicked into gear, right? And we're so scared of it now. It's like, a child is bored. Well, here, have an iPad. If you just let your child be bored, and again, I know it's not simple, and there are circumstances where it's just not going to work if you need the child to behave for, whatever reason. But, when you let a child be bored, they will find ways to entertain themselves. And there's also that whole magic idea I used to say to my kids, they say, I'm bored. Oh, that's fine. I'll give you a chore. You can go and sweep the floor. Oh, no, I'm right. We'll play with this. We'll play with that. We need boredom. Boredom is where imagination is born, and boredom is where creativity is born. And we need time to let our mind wander just for creativity. We're all creative in some ways.
Yeah. And it's not create. We're not talking like creative, like I'm going to go out and, create, the next #1 pop single, or, create an opera, or paint the next Archibald Prize, or write the next bestseller.
Pick one, pick a lane.
That's the problem with me, Kerri, is I choose to swim sideways across the pool, and people don't know what the fuck to do with me. It's terrible. The idea that, if we have, say, for example, an issue with our past, there was some sort of trauma in our childhood, some sort of childhood trauma. I don't care who you are. There's some shit that happened in your childhood that instilled a set of rules that still affect you to this very day. I don't care how old you are. There's some shit you've got to work on. We all do it. We do it till the day we die alone. It is in those moments that we have creative ways of reflecting on those things.
Yes.
Hang on, is that what happened, or did Mrs. Jenkins just have a shitty day? Suddenly, you are sort of thinking about something that happened in grade 2 in a completely different creative way.
Yeah, because
you wouldn't have that if you didn't have the no noise in your brain.
Absolutely. And when our mind wanders, that's what happens when that part of the brain, it's called the DMN, the default mode network. And that's it doesn't really matter, but that's what's activated when we're daydreaming. And what happens is, if you are busy, it's, doing something else, then it's not activated. If you are trying to think, if you're trying to solve a problem, you're thinking really carefully, like, okay, you're trying to do a maths problem. You're solving things in a very linear way, right? So you're going from A to B to C to D. When your mind wanders, when the DMN is activated, you're thinking in a very creative way. So when I say creative, it doesn't mean you're going to pick up a paintbrush. It just means that your mind will wander from A to C to a taco to a windowsill to what happened when you were 3 to back to the taco. Your brain is moving around, and you form links between things that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of if you were trying to address a problem in a linear way. That's why people get into the shower. They also get to the shower to get clean, presumably. But, it's a great way to think, because you get in the shower and you find that whatever it is that that problem that's been niggling you suddenly comes to you when your mind is free to wander. A lot of creative people love the shower.
can't run anymore. There was a time in my life where I ran 10Ks every day, no matter what. And I can't run anymore. But there was never a time where I walked out of the house with a problem and didn't come back with a solution. Because I wouldn't run with anything. I'd run with a set of house keys, and that was it. And the other example I'd like to give is when I can now snowboard so well, I got bored of it and I started skiing again.
That's why they call it snowboard.
Yeah, well, I would just like do it backwards, for the whole day, just something
which
to
of us
do.
haven't snowboarded backwards, honestly?
But when I first learned, I couldn't do it at all. First day, I was purple from top to toe, and I did not link one turn together. All right. I went back to our apartment in Perisher that I was staying with, like 7 people or whatever. Next day, first lift, got up, turned. Yeah. Now, I had not taken another turn since I had hit so hard. I was like, fuck this, let's go home. My brain put it together overnight.
Yeah.
All right. And it was only in that downtime. It was only in that time away. Do you think, Kerri, that we are starting to maybe look towards a place where, we say, try not to eat this, try not to eat saturated fats all day long, balance your diet. This is a way to have a long and healthy life with your body. Try to get some exercise. Try to get, 10, 20 minutes a day where your heart rate's a little bit up. Go for a walk. This is an important thing. Do you think we're going to get to the point where we'll now get a recommendation of activate your DMN for this long a day?
Absolutely. And I think we definitely will be advised, and we're advised now to have periods of time without technology and without our phones. And we need it for so many different reasons. And, I interviewed a lot of people for the book, and some of the responses were so interesting. People figured it out for themselves. So there was a woman who I talked to who had lost her son when he was young, and she sat every day, it was 5 or 10 minutes, where she would just sit quietly and think about her son and feel those feelings and feel the grief and feel the pain and allow it to wash over her. And then she could put it down and get on with her day. And there was another woman, it was one of my favourite quotes, who said to me that she needs alone time because there are knots in her brain that need untangling, right? And she just, so when she felt herself, getting all knotty and getting all tight, she would just take some alone time as, a mental health break. And I think it's, I saw what happened in lockdown, when so many young people and so many older people were just completely stuck on their devices, stuck with all of this input. And it was proper mental health crisis for so many people, and we need time away. And just, I'm the least spiritual person in the world, but things like getting out in nature is really important. We're actually biologically programmed as human beings to be soothed by nature, so soothed by trees and water. And that's why it's so great living in Sydney, because you can actually see the water, and if you're lucky enough, get close enough, you can hear the water. And those sounds literally serve as natural calmatives. So, we all need time away from our devices and with ourselves and with the natural environment.
As someone who, has no medical degrees, what would be your prescription of minutes per day to try to aim for?
Oh, look, it depends on where you are and what you're going through, and how, how good you are already with solitude. There are people who, I know a young man who took himself off for a 10-day silent retreat, which I just think is extraordinary for, a man in his early 20s. And then there are others for whom, taking a couple of minutes a day, like sitting on the toilet without picking up their phone, is a struggle. So I just say start small, start really small. Start by trying to go for a walk around the block without your phone. Start by, when you're pottering around your house, as we all do, and you're doing, a bit of housework or you're cooking or whatever, just try doing that with no devices. Don't take phone calls. Don't listen to music. Just spend, that particular task without any input. Start small and build up.
You also mentioned journaling. There's many ways to journal as there are ways to cook a fish. What's a simple framework that people can give a go?
I think literally writing down whatever it is, your mind junk, whatever it is that is going round and round in your brain, putting that down on paper. Or I really like having a conversation with myself. So as I said, asking myself questions and answering those. And the way you can do that is to ask yourself a question as you would ask a friend. How are you today? What are you feeling today? What do you want for the next week? Or what are you hoping for your life? Or what are your goals? And failing that, there are so many journal prompts online. There are journals with actual prompts in them. Something else that is a great one to do, and you can do that when you're journaling, you can just do that when you're just sitting with your thoughts, is thinking for pleasure. And, we are all so good at thinking catastrophic thoughts and bad thoughts and thinking of exactly what can go wrong and what we're upset about and what we're worried about and what we resent and what could potentially be the worst case scenario. But we can also think of good thoughts. Like we can also use our brains to fantasize about something that we would like to see happen, or to reflect on a really good memory, or to have an imaginary conversation with a person in our life who may or may not be here, who, we have, good and positive feelings about. So, we can do that. We just, for whatever reason, very, very few of us do that. Something that I do a lot is, I'll just take a walk in my mind around my late grandparents' home. It was somewhere where I used to stay a lot as a child, and I have lots of really good memories from there. And I will literally take myself into the front door and look around the kitchen and go through to the living area and walk up to the bedrooms. And it just calms me and makes me feel really good.
That's extraordinary. That's an extraordinary adventure. What an interesting thing to do as part of activating this default mode network.
Yeah, and just as part of realising that our brains are these really rich sources of material. We don't just have to get it from our phone, and we don't just have to get negative material from ourselves. There's not, I'm sure you know this, like our bodies don't know the difference between whether something is actually happening or whether we just are imagining it is. So that when we're thinking of something awful, we get all the stress reaction and all the unpleasant bodily sensations as though it was really happening. But by the same token, if we think of something really positive and good, our bodies also don't realise that's not happening. So there's nothing stopping anyone from reflecting on the best day of their life, or from imagining something that really wonderful is happening to them. I mean, up until very recently, I used to imagine myself winning an Oscar a lot. I did acting very briefly as a teen, and I would think about winning an Oscar way into my 20s and 30s when I wasn't acting at all. And sometimes I'd kind of turn it into winning an Oscar for screenwriting, and I hadn't actually written any screenplays, but it was still like a really, fun scenario. And I'd imagine what I was wearing and what my makeup looked like and my hair. And we can use our brains for pleasure as well as pain. We should be.
Now you're on the other side, I guess. Well, you're still very comfortable with being alone, I'm assuming. You also, though, are back in a relationship, and one sounds like it's quite a healthy one.
Yeah.
What about if there's people in our lives who are still in that kind of single phase, and they may wish to never not be in that single phase?
Yeah.
What are some ways that we can, have them in our lives without, I don't know, rubbing it in? I don't know how I want to ask that.
Honestly, it was very hard to kind of work out what my feelings were about being single and the terror that I experienced about being single from what our culture told me about what it means to be single. We are terrible with single people in our culture. I mean, I lost count of the number of times I was asked as a single person, why are you single? And sometimes it would actually be like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you not in a relationship? And the advice I got from people about how to get into a relationship. Now, I was married for 17 years, and not once in those 17 years did anyone say, why are you married? And since I've been in a relationship, no one said, why are you in a relationship? Why would you do that? Like, we just have this incredible stigma against singledom. We believe that relationships, as I said, are just the source of all happiness, the ultimate in fulfillment, when really being single is a perfectly legitimate way to live. It's just a different way to live. And, this whole romantic ideal about how, love and marriage is the ultimate goal, the ultimate source of joy. We all know that, in fact, a lot of relationships end up, they don't last till the end of your life. A lot of marriages end up in divorce, and a lot of people who are married are really not all that happy. It's a complete myth that romantic love is the source of all joy. And so I think for us with single people to recognise that it's just another way to live a life, and there's nothing wrong with being single, and to kind of try and challenge those cultural narratives about what it means to be in or out of a relationship. And, of course, to include single people. I think one of the hardest things about being single is that your couple friends tend to drop off and forget to include you. And, again, that's just because, what do we do with a single person? I mean, it's your friend. It's a person. So, we can all change our attitudes towards that, and to also recognise that being single is a choice. There are plenty of people who don't want a relationship, particularly I think a lot of women, because marriage has not, traditionally been great for a lot of women because of the unfair burden of childcare and housework. And as a single person, if you are a single person, and this is incredibly important, to not see being single as some kind of like train station, where you're waiting for the train that's going to take you to happy couple town, right? It's a destination. It's a place. It's a way to live a life. It may be that you end up in a relationship. It may be that you don't, but don't put off living your life or doing the things you want to do because you're going to do that when you find a partner. So you travel by yourself or you travel with friends. You take yourself to the show if you don't have a partner to go with, or you go with a mate. And to just stop seeing singledom as some kind of weird limbo in between relationships.
It's just come to mind because there's people in my life who are this. They're women in their, shall we say, anywhere from their mid-50s to their late 60s, who are alone. They live alone in a rental. They enjoy gardening. Well, maybe once a week, go and see one of their, nieces or nephews or whatever, and that's fine. Swap that out for a man in their late 50s to late 60s by himself in an apartment, renting, going to visit nieces and nephews. We don't treat him the same. We're pretty fucking sus of him.
Yeah, we're sus of him, but I would argue that we tend to feel sorry for single women. And I would argue that we don't need to feel sorry for single women, because I know a lot of single women who are really happy. And once I'd done the work on myself, I was really happy as well. And I know women who have no intention of getting back into a relationship. In my experience on the dating scene, I think that a lot of men really did struggle to be alone. And again, I think that particularly of my generation, I think a lot of the times after divorce, I wish I'd done more of it, but a lot of times women after divorce, particularly with kids, take the time to sort themselves out, to develop their inner resources, to develop their resilience, and just to look after the kids. And so they learn how to be alone, and they're often so relieved to get out of the situation.
Yeah.
But the men on the dating scene in midlife tend to be a little bit different, mainly for the reason that men on the midlife dating scene tend to have been left by their partners because, most men who exit relationships in midlife are exiting to somebody else. They've got somebody else lined up, and they tend to be quite bewildered, angry, resentful, distressed. And still from, men of my generation, there is that stigma against therapy, so they don't do a lot of working on themselves, and they kind of rush headlong onto the dating scene and often use women as pseudo therapists, and you go on a date and they're sitting there crying and talking about their exes, and it's rough. And I think and I hope that's changing, that young people will be more comfortable on their own.
Just when you mentioned the apps there, I did towards the end of it, I was complaining to someone about it, and I said, nah, you got to understand what you pick up that phone in a different way that the woman picks up that phone. You pick up the app when you're horny. She picks up the app when you're lonely. Two completely different outcomes.
Yeah, but you know what? A lot of men would pick up the app when they want someone to talk to, like when they want comfort and when they want like sympathy, and they just want someone to unload to. I mean, the number of times I would go on a date and I would just be listening to, oh, my wife was such a bitch. Oh, she did this.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she was bad. Or I mean, I had men crying on the first date, and not because of my beauty or overwhelming presence. They would be crying over their wives.
Both of which are stunning.
Thank you. But no, it was like a lot of men use women, and I'm sure, there'll always be people who, will listen to this and go, oh, but women behave badly too. Yes, they do, I'm sure. I didn't date women, I dated men, but there were a lot of men who, just were desperate for someone to talk to.
I'll tell you my experience with those, for one particular app, was that the dates that I went on that looked like they were going to go somewhere, as in like, oh, this could be a thing. I think it was 3 in a row. It was the husband or the boyfriend was out of town, and I was being lined up for the next vine to swing to. It happened 3 times in a row.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, this is really such a connection. This is amazing. What can I see again? It's look, now my boyfriend's on tour right now. Pardon, what?
Yeah.
And that happened 3 times in a row. I was like, fuck this. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm out. I don't want to be a part of that.
No.
I don't want to be in any of that noise at all. And yeah, I was far happier to be alone and then kind of figure out what it was going on with me that I was,
that you're attracted. Yeah. Well,
sending those
I don't
messages.
think you were necessarily attracting that, but I think what happens is that, when you feel that intense chemistry with somebody who it turns out to be, either cheating on a partner or is a narcissist or whatever else.
It's called the contemplative, pre-contemplation or the contemplative stage.
Yeah, but you've got to, there is something about yourself that is feeling the chemistry with people who aren't good for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
I learned that lesson.
Oh, didn't we all? Yeah.
That's an important lesson to learn.
Yeah.
You have such an extraordinary amount of knowledge in this area, and to be able to dive into it with you like this has been a true joy. I'm really grateful that you've written this book because it's a thing that we are so afraid of because the solution's in our hand. The solution to being with the uncomfortable time that I was on a date and I said a dumb thing and then the person cried. Like the solution to that is in my hand.
Yeah.
And I can just swipe and it goes away.
Yeah.
But do I learn anything about my behavior if I avoid processing that and being with the discomfort of it? No, I don't. It's all exposure therapy.
It is. It's all exposure therapy.
It's all exposure therapy. It sure is. But I'm grateful that you've written about it, and maybe we'll see a day where, the idea of not engaging with your phone, not just because it's bad to hold on to it, but because it means that the rest of your brain doesn't get to process all that other stuff. Yeah. It's like our brains process things when we're asleep. They process things when we're awake as well.
Of course
we're always
do.
told that sleeping is important to, compartmentalize memory and all this kind of stuff. But it's also really important when we're awake. Yeah. And there's a lot of that goes on when we're just, coiling the hose around the reel. Yeah. Or, grabbing that weed between the pavers on the way back from the bin.
Yeah, or working out what that weird gunk was at the bottom of my dishwasher. Yeah.
What the fuck is that stuff?
I don't.
Usually wheat picks. Usually wheat picks.
It was weirdly.
That's how the pyramids were held together.
Yeah, I think you're right. But it was weirdly sticky though. But anyway, that's.
Kerri, you're a delight. Thank you so much for making the time for this. And I promise you next time we chat, I will have a studio built for you.
Excellent. But this has been great. It's been terrific, and I feel really passionately about this, so it's always good to have a chance to talk about it.